So here's a quote from Stephen Hawking's 2010 book, The Grand Design. In it, he says, "How can we understand the world in which we find ourselves? How does the universe behave? What is the nature of reality? Where did all this come from?" Traditionally, these are questions from philosophy, but philosophy is dead. Philosophy has not kept up with modern development in science. This isn't just Hawking's opinion. Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, once said,
Call me later and correct me if you think if I missed somebody here. But philosophy has basically parted ways from the frontier of the physical sciences. When there was a day when they were one and the same.
Others cracked some jokes about it.
I think, therefore I am. What if you don't think about it? Do you not exist anymore? You probably still exist, even if you're not thinking about existence.
These are not the only thinkers to make such comments, but they're among the most notable ones. The question is, are they correct? Are philosophy and science such mortal enemies? In 1995, philosopher Nat Bloch published a paper called On a Confusion About a Function of Consciousness. In it, he differentiated between two types of consciousness, phenomenal consciousness and access consciousness. Think about phenomenal consciousness as all the experiences that you can have. The smell of coffee, how the weather can feel hot or cold, how the clothes can feel against your skin. Whereas access consciousness is all the thoughts and ideas that you're aware of in your head, things that you have access to, stuff that you can tell us about. Speaking of coffee, around the same time, a neuroscientist by the name Samir Zeki has been working on the visual system, trying to understand its components and how they work together. He conducted the first experiment trying to relate color perception with single-cell physiology in the brain. And more recently, he's been working on the study of neurocorrelates to affective states such as love, desire, and beauty. Fast forward to 2007, and Zeki publishes his paper, A Theory of Microconsciousness, based on his work. In it, he explains that we can think of consciousness as composed of two scales, the macro and the micro. The micro scale is all the little processes happening across brain regions. Think about all the little neurons firing in response to smells that you experience, stuff that you see, things that you feel. Each cluster is in its own little world. Whereas the macro scale is when all these outputs come together and are present to us in a way that allows us to understand them and even talk about them. Sounds familiar, right? What's fascinating is that after 15 years in the lab, conducting groundbreaking experiments trying to understand the relationship between perception and consciousness, on the final pages of his paper, Zeki writes, "Micro and macro consciousness, with their individual temporal hierarchies, really refer to what has been coined as phenomenal consciousness as opposed to access consciousness." And he cites Bloch's paper from 12 years ago. Here's only one example of a philosopher whose ideas found echoes in a scientist's lab and supporting his work. And he's not the only one. You can look into physicists like Schrödinger, if you've ever heard of Schrödinger's cat, Heisenberg, and others who worked out that philosophy is as important to science, just as science is important to philosophy. Philosophers and scientists are smart enough to find ways of working together rather than against one another. Bashing an entire discipline because you had a bad experience with it is not a very scientific way of doing things. Now, to go back to what Neil said.
Call me later and correct me if you think if I missed somebody here.
I would say he missed at least a couple.